Okay, so now I think everybody can see my screen. So in our instance of 3E here, I just tried to mock up the exact same scenario that Christopher was describing, where we have separate clients, separate entities. So I pulled up the entities that we have for Barclays, and you can see their entity use. Here I have one that's both a client and a payer for 114321. Here's a payee and vendor. This one is just a payer by itself, so a third-party payer. This one's a client and a payer. And then this is a client and a payer also. So you can see that it's, kind of disjointed a little bit. If you're looking at things from an entity perspective, you have a one-to-one relationship between entity and vendor, entity and client, all those things. And then we have the same thing if you look from a client perspective. These are the 3 clients that we were talking about. And you can see that they each have their own entity index. And I could show you the matters too, but I think it's probably most interesting to take a look at it from a metric perspective. So let's look at like a client management. I ran this metric, and it shows you, so I don't know, probably most people have not really used entity in their metrics. They don't necessarily come up by default, but they're super easy to add on. So all I had to do, originally I just had client up here with no entity, and I could just say add more, go to the client subset, the entity, click on it, select it, and then it ended up over here, which I've already done that. So then that just makes it available to you as one of the dimensions up above, and you can drag it down and then see things by entity. So you can see now that it's not really all that interesting. We have 1.8 million pounds billed for this, that's one. Well, it's 4 entities today, but you can see that it's obviously like the same client. So we have 1.8 million, but you can also see that they're each below $500,000. So it wouldn't be too hard for this to get lost a little bit farther down if we were looking at every client in your system. They might not jump to the top immediately. Similarly, like if I look at an AR aging metric, there we go. Matter aged AR, same kind of thing. So if I'm looking at it from a client perspective, and I bring in the entity in the same way, we can also bring in like the matter number. So this is what I think everyone's or most people's 3E instance looks like today, because they're not really aggregating things up by entity. And that's great for billing purposes, but you can see that like maybe collections people are more interested in seeing things at an entity level because they'd really like to make one phone call to the company at a time. Marketing people, certainly in business development, would like to see kind of, what are our top clients? And if we're talking about top clients, rather than thinking about it from a billing level, it'd be great to think of it from an entity level. So, so now I'm going to ask Karen if she can, in the background, run our entity merge. I gave her a file. It's really pretty simple. So I gave her a file that just says that this is we call them victors and victims. So, so there's one entity that's going to survive the merge, and the other 3 are going to get merged into that one entity. So it's really just a 2-column file. There's some options that you can choose, like you can choose to merge sites or merge addresses or things like that, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But for this purpose, I just wanted her to just merge the entities together so that we could see them. So I'm not exactly sure how long that will take. I think it just takes a minute. Let me just test it and see if it's finished now. So I'll search for Barclays. It would help if I could spell it correctly. Okay, excellent. So we used to have 5 here. I only selected the top 4. This was a different example of like a joint venture kind of thing. But so here you can see that she's already merged them. And now when I look at entity use, I can see that I still have all my different client numbers. I still have an individual individual vendor. This is the third-party payer. Here's the payee. They're all linked to this one entity through entity merge. We've got all the different sites. They're all joined up under this common entity now, so that's really great. And so if I go into my metrics and I try rerunning them, so let's see, I was looking at client management. I called my metric run bow test. So I'll just rerun that. Run number 4. And then I'm also going to just go ahead and do the matter aged AR while I'm in here as well. So I'll run that. Also run number 4, excellent. So now if I come back and try to look at this, see the results in the presentation, you can see that these 3 that we merged together now exist within one entity. So, if you're looking at this from a billing perspective, you still probably care about it from a client level of detail. But say you're doing collections, or say you're doing marketing or something, you get rid of the client level, and now you've got an aggregated line that shows you by entity what your fees are for that sole entity of Barclays. So I think that's super interesting and probably useful to some parts of your firms. Like, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of choice. This is the way for one user to save their metric presentation just at the entity level, but then billing people might still prefer to see it at the client level. I can show you the same thing from a matter HDR perspective too. Okay, so here we've also got it split out among the different clients and then aggregated at the entity level. But if I get rid of the client, then I can see it holistically at the entity level. And then the same way, we can still drag down our matter number, see things at a detailed level. We can do the totaling. So everything still behaves the same way as it did before. But the nice thing is that we can actually represent, the real relationships that you have within your firms. So I think that's all that I wanted to share as far as the demo goes. So I guess I'll pass this back over to Christopher.